Sarah Brown. I am a former Hollywood stunt woman who gave up my career so I could live in the wilderness and try to live in a way that's harmonious with the land. And at first I thought I wanted to grow my own food, but once I started learning more about farming, it just seemed like so much work. So much fighting against the wildlife. Where I live here is such beautiful wild land, and I would love to be able to get my food from the land without covering it in plastic irrigation hoses and without, poisoning or fighting against the wildlife, without all the fences and cages. And that's where Native American knowledge came in. I learned over time, after doing a lot of research, that there's food everywhere. There's such an abundance of even staple foods, really important staple foods. One of my favorite staple foods is the holly leaf cherry pits that I read one canyon full of these trees could feed an entire Native American village for a year. And I've made tamales and tortillas and porridge and milk, all kinds of things from these pits of the wild cherry that grow all over the desert without irrigation. Acorns were a huge staple for the natives that lived here. And I walk past the Native American grinding stones all the time where I live. And they're just screaming at me to tell some stories about the people who lived here that lost their freedom, lost their culture, lost their land, lost their way of life. And a lot of that was justified in the name of progress because people look at them as primitive because of the way they live. But now I am getting acorns from some of the same trees that these people got acorns from because they're like 400 years old. And I'm grinding them by hand, and I'm making all kinds of foods, porridges and flatbreads, tortillas, tamales. Today I made a little sweet dish. I mixed the acorn flour with peanut butter and a little stevia to make an energy snack that's sweet and delicious. And I've been experimenting with so many recipes. And what's so important to me is that this food comes from the trees. There's no irrigating, there's no chemicals, there's no fighting against wildlife. I don't have to plant it. I just collect them and then I leach them, and then I can grind them and make all kinds of foods that, and the acorns are high in carbohydrates and fat. They're just an incredible staple food that the natives here used. And I feel like it's very important to share with people how beneficial my life is because of this native knowledge, and because I have created or experienced such an incredible joy and ecstasy from living in a way that most people would look at as primitive, because it's more meditative, it's more connected. If you look at the grinding stones that are all over the land here, the women would sit together and grind their acorn flour or other foods, and they would socialize, and they would be out in beautiful fresh air and nature. To me, that is not primitive, that's a rich life. And I'm experiencing some of that by being able to learn from this Native American knowledge of so many foods that are around me. Another food that I really love and is wildly abundant is juniper berries. When I moved here, most people didn't even know you could eat them, or I didn't meet anyone who knew that they became sweet and you could eat them when they're sweet. And I only learned this from Native American knowledge, from researching. And what I found out is when they ripen, my whole mountain, the whole canyon is covered. Every 10 feet there's a tree that is filled with so many berries. It's unreal, and they're sweet. And so I could collect 100 gallons of them or more easily, but I haven't collected that many yet. But I've collected a lot, and I store them, and I make granola with them. I mix them with peanut butter. Sometimes I cook them in meals, but they have seeds inside, so you have to take those out. but I make energy bars and I snack on them, and they're an incredible staple food that most people have no idea that you could even eat in the modern world, in modern times here on this land that was once Kauai Sioux native culture, from my understanding. And another incredible wild food that grows in harsh desert environments is the Palo Verde tree, which makes beans. When they're young and fresh, they're like edamames. When they're dried, they're a bean that most people have no idea you can actually eat them, and I have cooked them and they come out kind of like black beans. And this is an amazing high protein staple food that grows on a tree that does not need irrigation, does not need chemicals, does not need to be planted every year. So there's a number of these kinds of wild food producing trees and plants in the wilderness that by me using them, it's made my life so much easier, because I live without a car, an hour away from the nearest store, and I can get an enormous amount of food from these plants, these trees, without doing any work. It's just knowing when to harvest them, how to store them. So there are prickly pears that grow wild in the desert and provide a delicious vegetable as in the form of the nopal, and the fruits, which I've experimented with using the fruits for all kinds of things, and I'll put them in gelatin, and I'll make juice, and I make salsas with the fruits, and so those take no irrigation from me, and they're so delicious if you just know how to process them. The wild California buckwheat is another plant that is high in protein and very nutritious, and I will grind it into flour and mix it with acorn flour and make tortillas. And you can also mix it with all kinds of different flours to make pancakes and breads, and it's very delicious when it's mixed in the right proportions with different flours. And that grows everywhere here. The pine nuts are a wonderful source of protein and fat, and these ginormous pine cones that grow on the gray pine trees here can produce up to 250 seeds per cone and provide just this amazing source of nutrition that the natives that lived here really relied on. I was told that a lot of the trees, the gray pine trees, were cut down when the miners came to mine for gold to build their gold mines, and so that took out a lot of the food source, which also feeds a lot of wildlife as well. So it's a goal of mine to plant more of those, because the seeds are just incredible as a source of nutrition, and they taste delicious. The California bay nut tree is a native tree that produces nuts that, when roasted properly, taste like a combination between chocolate and coffee. So that's another just amazing, rich source of wild food that can be explored, that I'm working towards growing more of those here on my property. And this is helping to fulfill my dream of living on the land harmoniously. If you look at how this land was left before colonization, it was pristine. There was no fences everywhere, no trash everywhere, no plastic. And it's my dream to live that way again. And so that's why I've been exploring all of these wild foods, thanks to the Native American knowledge and the people that were here before and unfortunately lost their way of living. Hopefully, I can help create more awareness of the value of these people's lives, even if they don't look valuable because they didn't have technology and all these things people think they need. I am a living testament that living closer to the land and living slower and living more connected to it and getting more food from the land has made my life unbelievably rich and fulfilling and beautiful. So I really hope to open people's eyes that what makes life very valuable has so much more to do with how connected you are to yourself, to your community, to the land, than it does to all the distractions and all the things that may seem to make life easier, but sometimes they take you away from the ecstasy and the beauty of nature.